Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. There's a new line of paint coming out. These days, it seems like there's always a new line of paint coming out. Is new paint even newsworthy anymore? Well, we're gonna talk about the paint, but the bigger narrative of this video is about the role of YouTubers in marketing for paint, miniatures, brushes, and beyond. On your screen, I'm trying out the new paint of the day. At the time of this filming, P3 has been acquired by Steamforged Games, and they're using a Kickstarter to relaunch the line. They sent me 19 bottles as early samples, and I'm testing them out. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good, and it might end up being a notable release. P3 had a solid reputation under the previous management, and I think that's gonna persist. This paint has some distinct qualities that I really like, and some stuff that I don't like as much. We'll get to that, but the paint preview is a side point to this video. For years I've been wanting to make a video called Should YouTubers Work with Hobby Companies? That video would be a deep dive into the ethics and conflicts of interest in the sphere of mini painting YouTube. I've tried to make that video a couple times now, but I have so much to say that it always comes out to 3 hours long, and so I haven't published it yet. I do think it's an important and fascinating conversation, and I'm hoping we can use this video to scratch the surface a bit. Before we go any further, I want to make it clear that me opening the topic of influencer marketing is not an excuse to go and harass anyone. Sometimes I see the comment that YouTubers are all just shills. That is a false statement, but the feelings behind it are totally valid. We're going to talk about advertisement and bias and the icky feeling that we get sometimes, and we're gonna do it in a respectful and constructive way. All of the content creators who I've met in person are good folks. From what I've seen, we're all pretty much in this for the right reasons, and we're doing our best to navigate an ethical minefield. This is a topic with a lot of nuance, and I want to have an open, honest, and mature conversation about it. Check this out. On the screen right now is paint, a paintbrush, and a miniature. This is the most common video shot in the realm of mini painting YouTube. This is essentially product placement and implicit endorsement for everything that appears on screen. Sometimes I don't explicitly name the brush or the paint that I'm using because it often doesn't really matter. But if I don't mention the brands, folks will ask me about them in the comments section. Product placement for paint, brush, and miniature is unavoidable. That means that our starting point here is already a gray zone of implicit endorsement for these consumer products. The tricky and sometimes icky bit is choosing which brands to use on camera. Shopping is a part of most hobbies, and our hobby requires some supplies. We often decide what to buy based on what our friends use, or based on what our internet friends use. Internet friends are often referred to as influencers, and that's because we have way too much influence over the purchasing decisions of other people. I spend a lot of time thinking about the implications and the ethics of that. We all know that the modern world is a capitalist nightmare. We're constantly bombarded by advertising. It's exhausting. Now ideally, mini painting YouTube should be a place where we can get some quality infotainment, engage with the hobby we love, and not have it all feel like a big icky commercial. I think the best way to de-ickify things is transparency. So let's talk about the big three that are on the screen right now. Why am I causing your eyes to look at these brushes, and these minis, and this paint? Why did I choose to film this particular trinity today? Well, I'm using some wolf hair brushes for the very first time. I bought these recently from Chronicle at the Nova Open convention. I'd heard about wolf hair bristles, and I wanted to try them for myself. I also thought the audience might like to see something a bit new. These brushes are doing well enough on the base coat, but I'm finding that even the smallest sizes are a bit limited in what they can do for detail work. In making this general assessment of the brushes, I also need to be mindful that this is a tiny sample size, and I've only spent about 10 hours with these brushes so far. All of my offhand comments will get magnified by the number of viewers that this video gets, so it's important that I try to be fair and precise with my words. I'm using the wolf hair brushes today because I think it's important to constantly be trying new things and broadening my experience in the hobby. I've found that the audience expects online hobby folks to have a girthy familiarity with everything that's going on in the market for our niche. If you scroll through comment sections on YouTube or Twitch or Instagram, you'll find tons of random questions about games and hobby products. How does brown wash from Company A compare to Company B? How well does the new line of paint from Company C go through an airbrush? Brand D isn't available in my country. What would you recommend instead? Is this game fun? Is it more fun than this other game? Have you ever tried this tool? Will this color paint from Brand E give me lore-accurate Moldorfs? We get a lot of questions that look kinda like this. I'd like to be able to answer more of them. The hobby is growing fast, so it's important for me to always be learning and sampling new things. After 10 hours of using these brushes, I don't know them intimately well, but at least now I have some general experience and I'm less ignorant than I was before. If you ask me a question about wolf hair, I'm more likely to have an answer now. Next up, the models. These cute little goblins might actually be the biggest conflict of interest in the whole video. These 5 are from an upcoming Kickstarter called Send in the Goblins. The Kickstarter will come in physical and digital form. I got the STL files as a free sample. I printed them with a 3D printer that I received as a free sample using free sample resin. I'm not an expert with this printer or with this resin, but yep, I have the experience now to confirm that they work. We've got some nice little goblins here. Send in the Goblins is a 5e compatible RPG campaign where you play as a goblin boss. When the boss needs something done quick and messy, it's time to send in the goblins. Play as one of 5 goblin bosses and use your unique boss skills and your never-ending squad of disposable goblins to fight monsters, solve puzzles, and win back your goblin lair. The Kickstarter is by Twin Goddess Miniatures. I'm friends with Adam at Twin Goddess Minis, and I hope he succeeds. Beyond that though, the two of us trade favors and collaborate sometimes. Adam has done some sculpting for me in the past, and I've featured Twin Goddess Minis in some of my videos. Part of the reason why I'm using these goblins as test models is to do a solid for my buddy Adam. Giving Send in the Goblins some screen time benefits me, and it benefits Twin Goddess Miniatures. But of course, the most important question is whether my choice of these as test models benefits you, the audience, and whether they make the video better. As test models, I do think they're pretty good choices. These are 6 different characters with a variety of different shapes and textures. Since these are goblins and a hobgoblin, I can try out a wide variety of different skin tones. I've found a place for all 19 sample colors that I have on hand. Later in the video, I might find a few sci-fi minis to paint. Generally, the choice of models in painting videos doesn't feel too icky. It's easy for you to judge for yourself whether or not the models are cool. I film at 4K and I do my best to keep things in focus. You either like these designs or you don't. So I'm doing some influencer marketing for my buddy here, but in the scheme of things, I think this is pretty benign. I think these models would be worthy of some screen time whether I knew the sculptor or not. Also, I'm not trying to get you addicted to gambling or a cell phone game or corn syrup here. I'm just letting you know about an RPG where everybody plays as goblins. Okay, the third item on the screen is the paint. A representative from Steamforged Games sent me a sample of the new upcoming paint. Let's dig into the many forms of bias that come along with free samples, and then we'll look at potential benefits to the viewer. From the point of view of a company, sending out sample stock to content creators is the best use of marketing dollars that mankind has ever found. The people who create content about painting minis love painting minis, so if the sample product is decent, then it's likely to get some pretty good press. These days, I have a standard response when a company reaches out to me with a product that might be interesting. I promise that I'll have a look at the sample off camera, but I make no guarantees that it'll ever appear on my platform. Sometimes the product is interesting or notable enough in some way that it does end up on my channel. If that appearance on my channel results in 1 or 2 new customers for that company, then the investment of them sending out the sample has more than paid for itself. Even if I don't put the samples in an episode, I think there's still some value in me just being aware of the product and being able to chat about it if the topic ever comes up. Let's talk about the biases and the conflicts of interest of people like me who receive free samples. There's a lot to untangle here. Checking your mailbox and finding something other than the usual bills and flyers and scams is a nice feeling. The raw physiological response to getting samples of hobby supplies is a similar feeling to receiving a gift. The brain is conditioned to respond with feelings of gratitude or even obligation. It takes some conscious effort to remember that this is not a gift. This is a marketing team doing their job. My job is to make good videos that are useful and enjoyable to watch, and hopefully not too icky. Being a YouTuber is a journey through a jungle. Early on, the feeling of a company taking the time and reaching out to us is an ego boost. It's validating that people know we exist and think our platform is worthwhile. When we're further along on our journey, sample stock becomes a bit more business as usual. It will always be fun to try new paint, but with experience, it's a bit easier to keep an even keel and not let sample stock sway how we run our channels. The whole scenario can have a whiff of bribery about it. Us YouTubers are aware of the retail prices and the nominal value of these samples, but this is a smaller source of bias than you might expect. Reselling these samples would be a big no-no. There are probably one or two cheeky buggers out there putting their samples on eBay, but to be clear, this is not ethical. Any content creator who does that is receiving bribes. It also probably breaks a lot of tax laws. Some companies will include fine print with their sample shipments that say that the samples remain the property of that company. They almost never ask for the return of half-empty bottles of paint, but I think a written understanding that sample stock is not an under-the-table income stream is a lawful good thing to have in place. Oh, Mantic gave me a copy of their new Halo board game, and the box is clearly marked as a demo and not for resale. I think this is a good way of doing things. I think this print run was intended for game stores, but in a way, game stores are kinda like local, in-person influencers. Anyway, for most of us, the samples go on supply shelves in our studios, and they aren't that much different from office supplies or a work computer or something like that. They have use and they have value, but they don't have the kind of value that we can spend, and that's a good thing. Of course, free samples does introduce some bias, but a consideration that's maybe more important is that we're skipping the experience of paying. I'm talking about the feeling you get at the cash register or when you get an order confirmation email. Sometimes there's a gut feeling of, oof, that was too expensive and I may have made a mistake. Or sometimes, more rarely, you actually get a good deal and you can feel it. The set of 10 wolf hair brushes cost me $40. I had the experience of feeling what it was like to hand over some money for these. They aren't my new favorite brushes, but I'm also not experiencing any regret, and that's a good thing to know. On the other hand, at the time of recording, I don't even know how much these P3 paints are gonna cost, and I certainly don't know what the gut feeling of paying that price will be. Another bias that we don't talk about much is our personal relationships with the people who work at these companies. When I'm giving screen time to a particular product, at the back of my mind I'm aware of the social media manager or partnership rep or whoever my contact is at that company, and I do imagine them watching the video. My video will at least have some reflection on their job. Will my video make that person's day a little bit better or a little bit worse? In this case, I imagine my contact at Steamforged Games may be confused and possibly a bit anxious. Where the heck is this video going? I sent paints to this goober guy with no strings attached, but this is not what I was expecting. Well, don't worry, buddy. This paint is pretty good. I have some notes for you, but this is at least a B+. No need to panic. I've found that most companies and company reps respect honesty. They usually know what the strengths and the weaknesses of their products are, and they're not going to be surprised if we talk about them. If a company breaks off the relationship with a YouTuber because of honest feedback, well, that's a loss for the company, and it's a useful data point for the broader hobby community. Honest feedback is extremely valuable. The best companies will have extensive alpha and beta testing phases where they can solicit feedback and make improvements ahead of launch. Side note, I think another part of honesty is to be careful with a YouTube clickbait game. A title that we might see is something like this: "Is the new P3 a scam?" Or "The biggest secret flaw in the new paint from Steamforged Games." That style of aggressive clickbait might get the click percentage up from 6% to 7% and give the video some more views, but it also means that the 93% of folks who scroll past that title without clicking are gonna get some false impressions. That isn't honest, and it isn't fair to the audience, and it isn't fair to the people who worked on the product. I don't think that level of negative clickbait is sustainable. On the issue of trust and honesty, I think there's a tendency to try to establish credibility by making sure to find extreme positives and extreme negatives in every product. I think there's the urge to overcorrect for perceived bias and be savage during part of the review. It's like a ritual to prove to the audience that we really are independent. I like what Marques Brownlee has to say about this topic. Paraphrasing here, you can't establish trust in a single video. There isn't a shortcut to credibility. Trust is established over a long period of time, and the best path is to be as honest as possible video after video after video. Honesty is always fair to the audience, and it's always fair to the companies. Okay, so I got these paints ahead of release. The early access time normally has more value to YouTubers than the value of the product itself, and that's another reason why we might be too cautious not to burn any bridges. Steamforged is relaunching the P3 line with a Kickstarter, and so they're trying to get a hype train going in time for that. If a hype train does emerge and viewers are looking for videos about P3 paint, then my video might be able to ride that train a bit and be involved in the conversation. Alright, this finally brings us to the benefits that viewers get from this type of influencer marketing. I think early reviews do have utility to the audience and to the broader hobby community. In this case, the paints are being released in the form of a Kickstarter. If Steamforged didn't send out any samples, there wouldn't be any independent opinions of this new line of paint, and folks considering the Kickstarter would have to take the company's word on everything. I don't think that paint previews are the highest form of YouTube infotainment, but they certainly do have a place. Of course, an ideal review of this paint would be from an ordinary customer who buys into the Kickstarter, spends a few years getting thousands of hours of experience with the line, and then makes a really in-depth review. I sincerely hope that video does get made someday. In the meantime, we've got a cohort of YouTubers with early samples. We'll get as much experience as we have time for, and we'll give you our initial impressions. So this is a minor side point, but I think the word review is overused. My sample came in the mail exactly 1 week before the launch of the Kickstarter. That's enough time to work on a handful of models, but I don't think it's enough to really call it a review. A few days with a product pairs better with a title like My Impressions of P3 Paint, or Let's Try the New P3 Paint, or something like that. It's often the case that a handful of preview videos will be released by different creators on the same day. That's the influencer hype train leaving the station. I know this phenomenon can be annoying, but I think it also has a huge upside. That gush of preview content means we get a variety of reasonably independent viewpoints from people who haven't all watched each other's videos. Getting second and third opinions and seeing how they line up is a good thing. And if you're tired of seeing P3 videos on your feed, well, don't worry, the hype train will be on to something else in just a few days. Okay, the next way that companies sending samples to YouTubers can benefit the viewer is this. It educates the population of mini painting YouTubers. I think this is completely underrated. This is the biggest reason why I choose to accept sample stock. Samples have a role in educating the population of mini painting YouTubers. I started this channel as a regular, mediocre hobby guy. Some twist of fate and the algorithm has gotten people to listen to me. It would be better for everyone if I actually knew what I was talking about. It would be a good thing if us content creators were more aware of what tools and techniques are out there. It's important for us to get experience with a wide variety of paints and brushes and minis and glues and clays and all that stuff. I do my best to have my eyes open and talk to people and go to conventions and always be learning. I learn as much as I can under my own initiative, but it really does help when samples just show up in the mailbox for me to play around with and get a feel for. Let's imagine that I received the sample of new P3 paints but never made this video. If somebody asked me if I'd tried the new P3 paints, I'd be able to say, yeah, here are my impressions. Okay, so here are my impressions. This paint pot design is classic, but I use a wet palette and I don't like dipping my brush directly into the pots, so I prefer dropper bottles. I think dropper bottles are an option in the Kickstarter, and it'll be interesting to see what percentage of customers choose each option. And if you are wondering, yes, the paint airbrush is fine. I thinned this with water and flow aid, and it works great. When working with a regular paintbrush, the paint has a nice consistency and the coverage is pretty dang good. The paint has one major feature that'll stick in my mind and help me to think about most of the other features. This is not a dull matte finish. This is a satin finish, and sometimes it's even trending beyond satin in the direction of glossy. Some people might like this, and some people definitely will not. If you don't like it, you can always change the sheen of the finish with a spray varnish. At a microscopic level, matte coats are bumpy and gloss coats are smooth. The surface of my painted goblins isn't bumpy and it isn't chalky. I did a wildly mediocre job of layering up the muscles of the big hobgoblin. I added many nasty, sloppy, unskillful layers of paint to those muscles. My color transitions didn't turn out smooth, but the physical surface is surprisingly smooth. There's some sort of self-leveling property in this paint that's keeping things relatively flat and smooth. It works when the paint is thinned, like I was trying to do with those muscles, and it works when the paint is thick straight out of the pot. I glommed on all the metallics straight from the pot, and they don't look too bad. I felt like I was having a couple of off days and not painting very well as I was working on these, and I kept expecting to find nasty chunks dried on there somewhere. But no, the paint seems forgiving. The old line of P3 had a reputation as being good for wet blending with big globs of paint, and good for glazing on thin. This new stuff seems like it dries with the same smooth finish either way. I'm hoping that a handful of other YouTubers are testing out this line, and I'll have some more observations about this paint, or at least some other ways of describing what they find. Giving out samples to influencers can definitely feel icky sometimes, but in this case, at least viewers are getting an early peek at some of these colors, and nobody who's looking at the Kickstarter is going in completely blind. Of course, I also put the metallic paints under the microscope. I have 4 samples of metallics, and they're all using aluminum powder to make the paint shiny, and this is a good choice for opacity. Big picture, there are a lot of paints already on the market. This stuff seems to be on par with a lot of the good ones that are already out there. I'm going to file P3 away in my brain as the kinda glossy, smooth, forgiving line of paint. I'll give it a tagline to help me remember. P3, Satin Forgiveness. This line might also be notable because it's from Steamforged Games. Steamforged has built a pretty impressive library of games, IPs, and licenses. I'm always happy to see new on-ramps for the hobby of mini-painting. Somebody out there is deciding that they want to paint their Dark Souls board game, and they might find their way to P3 Paint and have a good time with it. The communities for War Machine and Guild Ball aren't anything to sneeze at either. If P3 helps the folks who play these games to pick up a brush and start painting again, then it absolutely has a place and a purpose in the market. There's a ton of paint lines out there, and most of them are pretty dang good. I think competition is healthy, and I'd rather have too many options for paint than too few. Competition is tight enough that I believe label design and paint names should play a role in evaluating the overall line. I haven't seen the final labels for this line of paint yet, but I'm a little worried that P3 might fall into the classic traps of gamer paints from the late 1900s. Thamar Black is black, Boiler Black is dark metallic, Immortal Black is dark gray-green, Coal Black is dark blue-green. I'm taking this as a bad sign. If you're at a store with nasty fluorescent lighting, then it might be a real challenge to buy the color that you're actually looking for. There are so many lines of paint on the market, and too many of them use dumb gamer names. I want to be careful not to start a whole rant right here, but a color called coal black actually being dark teal is just wildly misleading. When a reasonable, well-adjusted adult designs a paint range, the term coal black should refer to a color very much like carbon black. Coal black should look like carbon black. There's an extremely good reason for this. The amorphous sp2 hybridized carbon structures that exist in coal absorb all colors of light. Coal isn't teal because it physically cannot be teal. There are too many conjugated pi electron systems absorbing radiation all across the entire band of visible light. Coal black is not dark teal. It can't be. Then again, maybe coal is a proper name. Maybe there's a Captain Coal or a Magistrate Coal in the world of War Machine. Or maybe Coal Mountain is the ancestral home of the Coal Mountain Quagmire. Maybe at dawn on the summer solstice, Coal Mountain appears to be a beautiful dark teal. Or maybe coal black is just an example of the kind of terrible and misleading names that can make an entire line of paint less user-friendly. Some of my favorite labels on the market are from Pro Acryl and Army Painter. Here's Pro Acryl: Jade, Dark Jade, and Bright Jade. Fantastic, thank you. Army Painter still likes to use dumb gamer names, but I complained loudly enough in public and in private. Now they also print a descriptive name and tell you where they fit in with their family of colors. This is very useful to folks with forms of color blindness, but it's also handy for anyone hunting through the paints at the store or even in their own collection. It's not difficult to make useful labels, and they benefit everyone. The word influencer is often used as a derogatory term similar to sellout or shill, but influence isn't inherently a bad thing. Influence can be put to good use. I'm proud of talking Army Painter into improving the quality of their paint labels. I don't know if the P3 labels have already been printed or not, but I'm hoping they might use this opportunity to take a step forward instead of a step back. Okay, that's my feedback regarding P3. Now I want to tell you about two of the rules that I've written for myself. I use these rules to try to keep this channel less icky than it might otherwise be. YouTube is a journey through a jungle. When we start on our journey, we have no viewers, but we have some ideas for cool videos that we want to make, and we think we know where we're going. As we grow, our inbox starts to get interesting. Do you want to collaborate on a video? Can you help with this fundraiser? Can you check out my Kickstarter? Do you want to go to a convention and teach a painting class? Do you want to judge a painting competition? Do you want to try this 3D printer? Do you want to try these brushes? Do you want to do an ad read for Blue Chew? New pathways through the jungle keep opening up. Some of them go in awesome directions, and some of them go in icky directions. Some of them are just kind of distractions from where you thought you wanted to go. So here's my first rule. The mail carrier is not in charge of my YouTube channel. The mail carrier is not in charge of Goobertown Hobbies. I have a secret list of awesome video ideas that I think are really cool and I would love to make someday. When a marketing department somewhere sends me some samples, it's easy to get distracted and paint the new models with the new paint and the new brushes. But every video has an opportunity cost. Every video that I make is also a video that I'm not making. The mail carrier and various marketing departments are always ready to supply me with topics for mediocre videos, but I endeavor not to get distracted. I'm trying to be more selective about what news and what new releases are actually noteworthy. Product reviews are a genre that do provide some benefits to the audience and the hobby community, but there are so many other things that I'm more excited to do on my channel. Today's topic of bias and conflicts of interest is something that I've wanted to dig into for years. This video is only partially scratching that itch, but I think it's a decent start. My second rule is simple. Good disclosures are critical. As I've gotten more experience wandering through the jungle, I've realized that the best disclosures are short and directly to the point. I've stopped using phrases like this one. Thank you so much to Steamforged Games, who very kindly sent along this sample, and I can't wait for us to check it out. But don't worry, they're not telling me what to say, and my opinions are completely unbiased. First off, they don't send samples out of kindness. It's a marketing strategy, and it's in their marketing budget. Now, if a truly tiny business gives you a sample, then it's probably appropriate to thank them. But in general, there's no need to thank corporations for engaging in capitalism. Also, of course us YouTubers are gonna have bias. That's what we've been talking about. We shouldn't pretend otherwise. I think the best strategy is just to disclose the situation and the arrangement as clearly as possible. These paints were sent to me for no charge ahead of release as sample stock. This is nice and clean. I'm not thanking the company for sending marketing materials, and I'm also not trying to apologize to the viewers or hide anything. Sample stock is a common arrangement that audiences are familiar with these days. Make a clear and prominent disclosure and move on with the video. Folk are here to see goblins getting painted. In addition to the disclosure in the body of the video, I think it's reasonable to add a more detailed disclosure in the video description. This can mention if I've been paid by the company in the past, or gotten significant quantities of other samples from them in the past, or if I've ever been employed by a competitor, or if I have friends who work at the company, or anything else that a viewer deserves to know about. Transparency makes all of this more honest and less icky. Alrighty, I want to close where we started. It is impossible to make a YouTube video in the mini painting sphere without giving some brand exposure to whoever made the miniatures, the paints, and the brushes. I think the important thing is to be thoughtful and honest about why we give screen time to the models and the supplies that appear in our videos. I want to always be learning and experimenting, and I hope that I'm always giving pretty good advice. Us YouTubers do spend a decent chunk of time thinking about ethics. We all love this community, and we really don't want it to feel like a big icky commercial. Okie dokie, I think this is a good stopping point. The topic of ways in which YouTubers can work with hobby companies is much broader than what I touched on today. Hobby companies also pay for advertisements and support charities and support community events and run classes and give tours of their facilities, and this conversation could go on for many more hours. But I think this was a useful nugget on the topic of early access sample stock. We'll end it here for today. Thanks so much for watching.